is here setting up is he retired at Halloween, and so we didn't know that, and so I had to kind of like hurry up and get everything going together, and it was just like, so it's up on YouTube. Good luck with your retirement. So anyway, MJ sent me. Let's get to our speaker unless there's any more announcements. Okay, MJ sent me a little biography of our presenter, so I'm just going to read it. Kavi Chintam, is that pronounced correctly, MJ? Chintam is the campaign manager for Illinois at Vote Solar. In this role, Kavi works to advance clean energy legislation and engages in coalitions to promote equitable and just measures. Kavi has a diverse array of experience in scientific research, policy analysis, on-the-ground organizing, community outreach, and grant writing in various sectors, including academia, national lab, local government, nonprofit, and labor. Prior to joining Vote Solar, she received her PhD in chemical engineering from Northwestern University, where she studied electrochemical pathways to sustainability. During her time at Northwestern, Kavi co-founded and chaired the Anti-Racism, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee in her department and co-chaired the Graduate Workers Union. Kavi completed a fellowship at the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine and was a postdoc at the Los Alamos National Laboratory studying fuel cell technologies. She received her BS in chemical engineering from the University of Pittsburgh. Kavi is deeply involved in progressive causes in Chicago and the greater Midwest and loves volunteering in her neighborhood, running, reading, crafting, and always has a foster cat or two in her home. That is the longest introduction I have ever made, not just for Sierra Club, in my life. So anyway, without further ado, let's welcome Kavi.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks for having me today. I have some slides to share. If someone can give me permission to do that, that would be great. Send a request. Okay, cool. Thanks for that. As was in my introduction, my very long introduction, my name is Kavi. I am here today to talk about data centers and their impacts on energy, water, and air quality. This is like a really emerging topic. I'm sure it's on everyone's minds. Feel free to interrupt me over the course of this presentation. I kind of just threw a lot of stuff together. Hopefully it's interesting. If you want to spend more time on something, just let me know. But I'll get it going. And already had a big introduction, but just highlight some stuff. I grew up in Florida, North Florida. I went to college in Pittsburgh, and then I got my PhD at Northwestern last year is when I finished, which was quite a journey, and very happy to be out of that now. When I was at Northwestern, though, I did chair my graduate student union, so I'm a big labor organizer person. And I, in Chicago, am really involved in causes on the ground. So I organize with One North Side, if you've heard of them, which is why I can't be in person today at your meeting, actually, because we have a town hall on Sunday that I'm emceeing. So we're doing our dress rehearsal today. I also volunteer with the Chicago Child Care Collective. I love cats. I foster cats. I love hiking. This is my family. We do the turkey trot every year. So doing that in a couple weeks. And now I work at Vote Solar as our campaign manager for Illinois, which means that I lead on all of our legislative campaigns and implementation that comes out of policies to make sure that what we write in policy is actually working in practice. And then continuing that circle to make sure that we're advancing policies that help folks across the country, and specifically for me in Illinois, get clean energy in an accessible and equitable way. So This is kind of the agenda for today. I'll be talking about what data centers are, really going to start basic, how they specifically relate to AI, how they impact our energy, water, and air, and what are some of the existing and emerging policies in the US, and specifically what the status in Illinois is. So, what are data centers? It's become quite a widely used term, but I think it's really tied to AI and they have other uses as well. So, broadly, a data center is a facility that houses and runs IT infrastructure that's critical to the digital economy. So, data centers have existed since the internet has existed. That is how we host all of our websites. That is how we have email and file storage. And if you take a picture of your dog and put it online, it gets, uploaded to the cloud, and that is essentially what is stored in a data center. And now, more recently, generative artificial intelligence is part of what data centers um, run as well and house as well. So specifically, what is in these big data centers? So IT equipment, which can include servers, storage devices, network devices that handle the processing of data, the storage of data, and any transmission needs. So this picture is a little illustration of server closets within a data center. And this is basically what you see in a data center, are, many, many of these just kind of lined up, and this is what is used to store data and do all the things I just said. Data centers also have infrastructure and utilities. So they have air conditioning, they have redundant electricity systems to ensure that if the power goes down, they're able to keep running, and electricity conditioning to ensure uninterrupted operations. Connectivity, they're also generally located near high bandwidth fiber networks that allow for low cost, high speed data exchange. And lastly, physical security is a big part of data centers. You can't just walk in casually. They require like a full background check before you can go into one. I talked to an elected official kind of recently that went to a data center that's being built in her district, and she had to like share her passport and like her social security card and all of this stuff in order to get in. And there's also other sort of physical security systems in place, including fire suppression, to make sure that everything is kept safe. So you can imagine that all of these components are really important to keep a data center going, but that means that they're really resource intensive in a lot of ways as well. So, how does this all connect to AI? So to define, there's traditional AI and then there is generative AI, which is what we're seeing more recently. It's a specific type of AI that uses deep learning techniques, which essentially means that it takes things that are already existing and then is able to be creative in a way and make new content based on its base learning that it's doing. The actual workflow of generative AI, you can see it in this diagram on the right. So first, the AI is trained on massive data sets. This is actually a big part of data centers. That is what data centers allow for. Um, they basically allow for a bunch of data to be imported and the models to be trained, which does use a lot of energy and all of these other resources that I'll get into in a minute. After it starts learning patterns and relationships, the model is further trained using neural networks, which is, that is, you might think of like your brain when you think of neurons, which is where the word comes from. But data centers and AI also have neural networks that further process the data and figure out what connections there are between different points of learning to predict or generate different information and outputs. And then there are learning patterns or data distribution. So the model will learn structure, grammar, styles, and features. now it's not memorizing data, but it's actually understanding how it's formed, and that's kind of the next step of AI. It's understanding and not just memorizing things. And then there's new output generation, so it actually generates new content when it's given a prompt. So that's what the user interface that you might see if you have ever been curious and took a look at ChatGPT or something. That is the point that we start seeing things on the user end. And then lastly, there's a feedback loop in that feedback is refined based on how people continue using these models, or additional training is used for accuracy and quality control as well. So that's just generally what generative AI is. But some more stuff on it. Benefits, and I'm curious to hear folks' thoughts on all of this as well. Um, Benefits is that it does work very quickly. It can produce really high quality content very quickly, faster than we've ever seen before. It can, in a sense, boost productivity and creativity across industries. One might argue that maybe it's not doing it in the best way possible or in the most equitable way possible, but it certainly is doing that. And it also allows for rapid content creation at scale. So you can run tests in an AI software, and instead of, having to replicate it on a bigger scale manually, which could take years, you can do it pretty quickly with generative AI. It can also enhance technical output, so that's why there's a lot of interest in using it in healthcare. Um, Ideally, in an ideal world, it could free up time and resources for human-centered tasks. Risks are outputs can be inaccurate, biased, or misleading. I'm sure everyone has seen like AI generated hands that have like 6 or 7 fingers. Or even if you ask for like a summary of something, it'll throw in some stuff that actually isn't true. And if you aren't paying attention, then you could really look like a fool. It can unintentionally, or frankly, I would also say intentionally, based on what the training model is, produce offensive or copyrighted content. Again, all of this AI is based on stuff that already exists in the internet. So if there's a lot of offensive stuff on the internet, that is what will be outputted. So that is, in my personal opinion, a dangerous feedback loop that should be careful about. Um, Similarly, it's vulnerable to ethical misuse and manipulation. If folks have heard about deep fakes, that is generative AI, where you can just show videos of people doing things that they never really did, things like that. Um, it's very expensive. So on the developer and the company side, it's pretty much only accessible to large companies that already have a lot of resources and power. It requires human oversight to ensure quality and compliance, which I won't super get into this at all, but there is an interesting question that has been floating around, and people doing a lot of good work in the area of labor as related to AI, because there's a lot of humans uh, doing AI review as kind of a side hustle, but then the hours they work are kind of crazy, and they're not really compensated as much as they should be based on how much profit these models are generating. So that's a whole other thing. And then there are also, with any technological advancement, regulatory and legal risks that will probably continue to evolve as this technology gets even more sophisticated. So those are some of the like broad risks and benefits of AI, and of data centers generally based on AI. But if we get into the environmental considerations and probably what y'all are most interested in, as I mentioned, energy, water, and air are kind of the three big areas where we're seeing major impacts of data centers. So energy impacts. Um, for the record, this is what I'm most familiar with. Water and air are much, much lower in my expertise, if anything at all. But I I did my research and kind of pulled together what I knew. Energy impacts is really my bread and butter, since I work at Vote Solar, and am an energy person. So I can definitely talk more about this much more in depth. These are some graphs just showing the increase in energy usage due to generative AI. So this graph on the left is showing, all you have to understand is that this bottom darker blue is showing the estimated data center capacity demand in gigawatts, and you can just see how much greater it is with the generative AI workload by 2030. And it was kind of about to level out, but with the increase in generative AI in recent years, this has just like really skyrocketed, and this is like basically exponential. And frankly, we don't know where this curve will go. It could be, AI could become not popular anymore and that could go away. I think that's unlikely. It will probably continue to be popular, to some extent. And then this graph on the right is just, further putting a finer point on it, showing that both AI and non-AI workloads will be key drivers of global data center capacity through 2030 at least, certainly beyond. So you can see that the AI workload is going up, but the non-AI workload is also going up because of our continued dependence on technologies that are run through and depend on data centers. But certainly the generative AI is adding to this in a way that is unprecedented, which is a word I try not to use, but this is truly unprecedented, I would say. Um, so going like zooming out a little bit, and I'm not sure how familiar this group is with these terms, so I thought I would just do a little primer on how energy markets work. Hopefully this is helpful to understand. But basically, Illinois doesn't exist in a vacuum. We're part of two regional transmission organizations, or RTOs, called PJM and MISO. Northwest Cook County and me, and I'm in Chicago, by the way. I live in Edgewater. Um, we are under PJM. MISO is for downstate folks. We live in those systems with other states. So PJM covers, many other states, as does MISO, and they are responsible for balancing what the energy supply is and what demand is at all times, and determine how much more supply is needed and what demand is going to look like moving forward, so that we're prepared. Capacity, as it says right here, is the commitment in advance from a power generator to produce electricity when called upon by the RTO. And ratepayers, so people like you and me, pay for those commitments as part of the supply charge on their electric bills. So if you've ever looked at your electric bill and see all the different charges on it, you will see both a supply side and demand side set of charges. Capacity is specifically on the supply side. And if folks are more interested in all of that, I highly recommend, getting connected with the Citizens Utility Board. They do really cool utility bill clinics where they'll walk you through your bill line by line, and line by line, and tell you what each, line is coming from. So RTOs, so like I said, we're in PJM, the RTO called PJM. They hold capacity auctions to secure commitments from generation sources. So that could be gas plants, that could be coal, that can also be solar and wind, and other types of renewable energy. They get commitments from those sources to meet the demand that they have projected, particularly during times of peak demand, which is when we have the most demand. So that can be like when everyone's coming home from work and is turning on all their stuff. That could be a time of peak demand, and we'll need the most supply then. What we've seen in Illinois and across the country is that the projected demand has really grown. So you can see here in this graph, the line has grown a little bit, but it stayed pretty steady. And now the projections are similar to the thing I showed before, are really going up. And these are just different projections based on more conservative and, more liberal estimates of what that demand will look like. And with increased demand from something like data centers or from whatever, that means that meeting that peak demand with an appropriate amount of supply has become really hard. And that has caused the price of the capacity to spike to record levels, which then impact your utility bills on the supply side, and directly make that number, that line item go up, which isn't great. And it's, not because we're using more energy, it's because these really wealthy companies are creating these data centers and not bringing their own supply. So that is really the crux of of the energy part of data centers, is that they're bringing a lot of demand, but they are not bringing supply with them, and are basically just sucking out of the limited supply that already exists. So, specifically in Illinois, some of the impacts that we've been seeing in different studies that have been shown, by 2030, data centers in the PJM grid, which this was in a report by PJM, may need over 50 gigawatts of power, which, to put that in perspective, is enough to supply 20 plus million homes, which is equal to all the households in these states combined, which are all also part of the PJM territory. That is, I cannot truly express how insane that is, and how huge that is, and how much power, or like how many resources that means we would need to build out in order to meet that demand. And right now, as it stands in all of these states, including Illinois, we don't have guardrails to require the supply to go up with the advent of data centers. Right now, it would just be on our bills to do that. Um, and then again, to put a finer point on it, data center growth is driving those cost increases. In one of the capacity auctions that just happened over the summer in PJM, data center growth was responsible for 9.3 billion of a total of 14 billion. So without data centers, we would have seen maybe 6 billion capacity bill, and instead it's 14 billion. Um, that would add about $70 per month to the average household bill, which is huge and can be devastating for a lot of people. And I'll also mention that the impacts are actually even greater in downstate Illinois, because of how the MISO auction panned out. So not great. This map on the right is just showing the total capacity cost estimated in PJM territories through 2023, particularly demand uh, driven by data center growth. So specifically in ComEd territory, where we are, you can see that that is up to $21.4 billion, which is, again, don't love this word, but it is unprecedented for sure. Okay, I'm going to go through some of the solutions in a minute, but I'm going to just go through the impacts first. So, water impacts, like I said, this is kind of not my expertise area, but hopefully this is still digestible. Water usage of data centers is a big problem. It's also why Illinois and other states around the Great Lakes are so enticing to companies when it comes to data centers, because we have such a large supply of water. They can use up to 5 million gallons of water per day via evaporative cooling. So those servers that I showed a picture of earlier, those get really hot, just like your laptop or your computer might get really hot when you're like really going to town and typing a bunch of stuff and have all these windows open. Similarly, these servers get really hot, and they can get like really hot. So there's a requirement for water to be used, as water, just like when we sweat, when you sweat and that water evaporates off your skin, you get cooler. Similarly, exact same system, except this is like manual cooling water, since it evaporates first of all, there's minimal opportunities for recycling because it evaporates. There are opportunities for recycling, but it's not as good as if you were just recycling all of the water because the whole point of it is that it evaporates and cools down those servers. Um, this is probably obvious, but water use rises with energy demand and AI workloads. In 2023, data centers consumed 7.4 billion gallons of water, which is projected to double by 2028. Um, the impact is not just the evaporative cooling that I mentioned, it's also um, subsequent power plant cooling that happens because of the energy demand of data centers as well. So that's like in a different part of that chain, but it's still relevant. And then just to put it in perspective, I know this is something I feel like people have been saying, and it's very much true that if you put a little chat GPT prompt in, like I don't know, like can you write an email to tell my friend that I can't go to her birthday party or something? That is estimated to use roughly one bottle of water, and that is truly like you're just pouring a bottle of water out. As I said, evaporative cooling means that it's harder to recycle it. So that is scary to think about. Also, to put into perspective, Meta, for examples, for its Llama um, AI model, it uses 22 million liters of water, which is equivalent to about four over 4,000 pounds of rice, which is what 164 Americans consume a year. So just like whatever clicks for you, I think different metaphors click for different analogies click for different people, but it's a lot of water just to maintain these data centers. In Illinois specifically, as I said, we have the Great Lakes near us. So that means that we're quite uh, we're a place where data centers want to build. And the data center water usage depends on where you are, just based on climate and based on proximity to water, things like that. So we're not as high as like Washington or Arizona, but we're still up there. Um, some other impacts, a lot of data centers try to use potable municipal water for cooling, even though the supply is meant for communities, if there are no regulations around that. Water usage, I would say most importantly, is not well tracked or publicly available, which can create a lot of transparency issues. So we might not even know like how much water is truly being used. Um, in some states, data centers can locate near small aquifers. For example, we have the Mahomet Aquifer in Illinois. Um, it's been protected from a lot of things like carbon capture sequestration, but there are other threats like data centers that exist as well. Um, Rapid growth of data centers could outpace local infrastructure, especially in rural communities. And then the environmental impact is big because of the importance of the Great Lakes in maintaining our ecosystem. Great Lakes hyperscale data centers are forecasted to withdraw over 150 billion gallons, which is equivalent to 4.6 million households. So again, Great Lakes are super important to us, and not just us, but many other living things, many other ecosystems that exist beyond humans. And data centers really do stand to threaten that without proper regulations in place. Lastly, air impacts. This is a backup diesel generator, so that is the most relevant thing to air quality impacts of data centers. They're meant to be used sparingly, so data centers operate on a thing called five nines, which basically means that they want to be operating 99.999% of the time. Um, that is because they don't want like the internet to go down and then everyone doesn't have access to whatever, or they don't want the training of their AI models to be slowed down or anything like that. So that is why they like to use backup diesel. It's meant to be used sparingly when like the power grid goes down, um, things like that. benefits for companies in terms of diesel generators is they can easily be stored on site. They're relatively cheap compared to other things, for the most part, and they're pretty easy to obtain and ship across the country to wherever. Risks of backup diesel generators for people is human health impact. So backup or any diesel in general can increase asthma, respiratory, heart conditions, especially in children and elderly people, which can lead to, ER visits, hospitalizations, etc. Um, Environmental damage is also relevant. They can contribute to ground level ozone. They can harm nearby crops or trees and vegetation. They can also potentially, in high concentrations, cause acid rain, which can then impact the entire food chain. They can also reduce visibility potentially. And then the last category is global climate. So diesel, just kind of pumps out pollutants, which can just cause issues with the global climate, contribute to climate change, and just related to the environmental damage, just cause climate damage as well because it's not a clean way of generating electricity. It's the bottom line. So data center policies in the US. This is first. I just wanted to show this map of data centers across the country right now. So you can see that there are like 244 in Illinois, and that number is just going up. There are a bunch across the state, I mean, the country. This is from a website that I should have linked in here. I think it's behind this image, which I'll fix. But this is updated regularly, so you can see how many new data centers are popping up, and you can like zoom into the state and see exactly where they're popping up in Illinois and all of that too. My next slide is actually from another Sierra Club chapter in Michigan, who made this kind of ideal state policy and regulation in tandem with local action, for these three different buckets. So ratepayers and taxpayers. These are kind of like big ideas on how to make sure data centers are paying their fair share and contributing to the communities that they're getting into. So for example, removing tax exemptions for data centers, making sure that there's specific rates that they have to abide by to protect residential customers, um, definitely scrutinizing economic benefit claims. So, for example, and this goes in hand with no amount of revenue is worth sacrificing health and well-being. There's a lot of claims around data centers providing a bunch of jobs for people, and there haven't really been, at least the last time I looked, really clear reports on how many jobs there are. It could be anywhere from 10 to over 100. There's certainly jobs that come up when data centers are being built, right? They're construction jobs with actually building them. However, once they're built, there isn't a ton of jobs for like working class folks. A lot of it can be remote work for tech workers, who might not even live in an area. There are counter arguments that data centers could bring more economic opportunity in terms of other nearby businesses coming up to support workers that do work on site. So there's a lot of back and forth.
People on data center.
Sorry, did someone say something?
No, not a year.
Okay. Okay, I thought I heard something. No worries. Um, yeah, there's just a lot of argument or debate, I would say, back and forth about um, how many jobs and what economic opportunities are actually coming to residents, and whether it's a social risk and the health risks are worth that. So that continues to be things that advocates are thinking about. In terms of climate, this is really where my focus is. I guess it falls in all of these, but requiring utilities to offer renewable energy and storage for data centers. And I would say more so in Illinois, what we're looking at is requiring data centers to invest in renewable energy themselves, and also limit the diesel backup power that they have, um, to make a as little as necessary sort of thing. Community and health, which is related to these other two categories, again, closing loopholes on diesel backup generator permitting, transparency requirements for everything, for diesel, but also for water, as I mentioned before, and then also taking into account distance from homes and schools and parks and communities, to make sure that if there are diesel backup generators that are used, they won't spread to communities, um, at all, or at least to not a big extent. One case study I wanted to bring up is Minnesota, since it is in the Midwest, and they passed a data center related bill um, earlier this year in the spring. So some of the provisions, I'm going to give my non-colored uh, bullet point list of this, and then I'll talk about how advocates felt about the bill. But the energy provisions included a 2 to 5 million annual fee to data center companies tied to the amount they were contributing to peak electricity demand. It required the Public Utilities Commission in Minnesota to oversee data center energy contracts. It also required utilities to either provide clean energy plans or clean capacity plans for businesses. It also included data centers and state solar requirements, which means that the solar power goals for the state, data centers would be included in those numbers. And then for water, projects that used more than 100 million gallons a year required pre-application evaluation and specific permits to operate. And then the last thing for A is it required a certificate of need for backup generation. So this is kind of a very uh, light outline of what was in the bill, and I'll share that a lot of advocates actually weren't happy with what ended up coming out of this bill. There's some good things in there. So in particular, they supported the elimination of a sales tax exemption that was originally going to be in place for data centers. They also like the ability for agencies to request info for data center water appropriations as well. They appreciated that all energy provided to data centers comply with the 100% clean law, and that benchmarks and off ramps for data centers were prohibited. And they also like that the certificate of need permit was still required for backup generation. However, a lot of advocates overall opposed the bill in that form because the water section essentially reiterated provisions that already applied to large water appropriations. So it didn't actually really help with making sure that they followed more stringent water requirements. They also felt that there wasn't sufficient environmental review and that data remained non-public, so it wasn't publicly available and transparent environmental information regarding water and energy usage. Um, the thing I have here, which says that utilities can provide clean energy or capacity plans for businesses, they were concerned about the "or" word in there because a capacity tariff could allow a loophole for data centers to build their own gas plants, and not clean energy plants, which could end up falling outside of Minnesota's 100% clean energy law. Um, they didn't like that there were no protections on site for siting, noise, or light pollution, and then further concerns with transparency problems for local governments. So overall, this was a step, but overall advocates were not really satisfied with what was in this bill, and I know they're going to continue to fight to have better regulations around data centers. Um, I also wanted to share this resource, which shows what states in the US have large load tariffs. Um, that basically means that different utilities in these different states are able to file a tariff with the Public Utility Commission. So, like in Illinois, it's the Illinois Commerce Commission. Currently, ComEd is filing a tariff with the ICC in order to put more rules on large loads, including data centers. Tariff, I like when I started this job, I was confused about that word, but it just means that it's the filing of rules that utilities have to follow. That's all it means. So you can see that across the country, there are a lot of states that have tariffs put up or are beginning that process. It follows a wide range of what as an advocate I would say works well and doesn't work well, but it certainly is good, I think, that states are actually thinking about this because data centers are so unique in as a demand hungry entity. And then relatedly, these are states in blue that are actually engaging with legislation around data centers. Um, this is also a resource that is updated pretty regularly, I think. So you can say there are 22 states as of now. They don't necessarily have data center policies, but they have started to engage with different ideas. Okay, and lastly, Illinois. What's going on here? So you probably heard that we successfully passed the Clean and Reliable Grid Affordability Act or the SURGA Act a couple of weeks ago. This we've been saying is kind of like a step one in the process to addressing the demand that data centers are bringing. So as a first step, it includes a lot of provisions to address massive energy demand, increasing capacity with battery storage and encouraging faster and more deployment of renewable energy like solar and wind. And then additionally, there is a provision in there around air quality for data centers. Um, those requirements include requiring Tier 4 standards for diesel engines, which is um, the most stringent or it's the most technologically advanced kind of backup diesel generator. So it's cleaner and more efficient than like a Tier 1 or 2 or 3 engine. Um, the requirements also include that it has to solely operate as an emergency or standby unit, so data center companies can't just run these willy-nilly when they just want to have more power. Unfortunately, towards kind of the end of the session, it does include a 24-hour exemption during blackout events, which means that if there is a blackout, these generators could run for 24 hours. We are not happy about this and are definitely planning on fighting back against this in the spring. We're glad that the Tier 4 standards are in there. That's really important and the stipulation that they have to run as an emergency, but this 24-hour exemption is not something that we want to keep having in law. So, next steps for Illinois is we have begun convening again to determine a path forward for energy provisions in a data center specific bill that will start running in the spring. Um, there's this term called Beyonce. It's bring your own new clean energy, and that is what we're hoping to put on data centers. That essentially is exactly what it sounds like. They have to bring, ideally, we'll see what percentage we end up settling on, but ideally they would bring 100% of their energy demand. They would offset 100% of their demand by bringing 100% of supply um, and have it be new and clean energy. Um, Early on, when we were in negotiations before we stopped negotiating this because it got pulled out of the Surge Act. Um, there were a lot of conversations around what percentage is appropriate and actually economically feasible. So we'll continue having those conversations. We also want to make sure that there are water provisions in there to preserve our water supply. Um, Most importantly, require reporting. I know that the water advocates are working on some other requirements that they think are really important. And then lastly, again, tighten up these air quality and backup diesel restrictions to protect communities where these data centers will be sited. Um, and just to share, some of the key actors involved in this are data center companies, which, can be Google, Meta, um, Microsoft, all these big companies. Labor is really interested, as I said. There's a thought that there are a lot of jobs that come to this, so organized labor is interested in this, which I certainly want to dig into more to understand. Environmental advocates like me and like y'all are, of course, care about this. Ratepayer advocates are super interested in this because data centers are causing these massive price spikes on everyday people, on Illinoisans across the state. They want to make sure that rates stay low. And then lastly, an interesting actor are trial lawyers. So they aren't interested in this regarding energy, air, or water, anything I've talked about in this presentation, but they are interested because Illinois has something called the Biometric Information Protection Act, or BIPA, and that is a cool act that was passed a few years ago that really stringently protects our biometric information. So, like our face, our fingerprints, all of that. It really helps folks stay safe and maintain a level of digital security. And we're one of the few states that have that. Data centers are really interested in being exempt from that sort of thing because they hold a lot of that data. They don't use it, but they hold it. A lot of trial lawyers and folks in the ACLU feel very strongly about BIPA. So they are part of this conversation writ large as well. Not regarding the environmental stuff, but they are another actor in this broader conversation around data centers as well. That is all I have. Thanks so much for listening. And I'm happy to take any questions, thoughts, comments, further concerns from anyone.
Thank you very much, Copy. I think there's a short in this thing. So has anybody got any questions?
Yes, yes. Hi. Where should I? Is
The
this
microphone's right there.
microphone's here? Okay. Well, so thanks very much, Kavi. That was, I was sort of vaguely aware that this was an issue, but all these specifics really put it into context for me. So thanks very much.
Yeah.
Um, my question is, I've sort of been wondering for a while as time goes on. I know that more and more of my stuff is in the cloud, meaning that it lives at a data center, and sort of out of sight, out of mind. I never delete old files or anything like that, and it's probably a drop in the bucket compared to the AI, but I sort of think to myself, well, if I never threw away any single piece of paper that came into my house, I don't know if there would be room for me to live there anymore. Are the companies that are keeping all this data in the cloud, do they do anything to try to get rid of stuff that people actually have no use for anymore? Or, I mean, do you have any thoughts about, me, the individual consumer, hogging space in the cloud that I don't really need, but it's there because I don't pay attention to it?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. I think that like you and me, like our photo storage and our cat videos, whatever we have, is truly a drop in the bucket compared to generative AI and the amount of energy and water and everything it uses. So I don't I I wish there was more like we as individuals could do in that way. And there's certainly a lot that individuals can do in terms of advocating for data centers to have more regulations, but I think it's just such a small amount that it doesn't really make a difference if you like clear out your if you delete some stuff here or there. Um, I think it's like 0.0000001% of the total amount of things being used. But it's a good thought. And I wonder what the actual percentage is. I don't have that on me, but interesting to think about.
Oh, Jim, there's a question in the chat from Renee. Are there any alternatives
Oh,
to water for cooling? Can you ask that?
um, I don't think so, at least nothing that is tried and true. I think that there is more research being done on how to better recycle water that's being used for evaporative cooling. Like, how can we capture the the like water that's evaporating through like specific sort of chemical compounds or whatever in order to help the recycling of it. But I think water is the cheapest and the most like I hesitate to say this, but I feel like any alternatives to water for cooling would probably have a million other concerns. Like if it's like chemicals or something, then you're dealing with like, okay, is this chemical safe or is it non-toxic or whatever? So I do think water is the best option, but I think it's the best option in terms of like it's the safest in a lot of ways and it is the cheapest. But I think there are ways data centers and, technologists, whatever, can be more responsible about figuring out how to recycle it better. Because it is like, we can recycle water, but when it's evaporating, it's much harder. But I feel like there must be a way to do it. Um, I'm not a, I don't research anymore. I'm not like in the lab, but I'm sure there are people in labs doing that work.
Well, where's the evaporation going? Like,
It evaporates. I mean, it's just like,
where does it go?
Into a
This is
cloud,
like,
into a cloud that will rain somewhere. There must be.
so we're adding more
So
moisture
is,
to the air.
Is thermal pollution, is it significant at all?
oh, I don't know the answer to that. I don't think so because I think the water does a good enough job cooling that there is minimal thermal pollution. I think that if there wasn't enough water being used, then yes, but then I don't think data center companies would even make that be a problem because then their like servers would be at risk. So I don't think it's out of the goodness of their hearts that there's no thermal pollution, but I think that would mean that their servers are not doing
I mean,
well.
I'm thinking of like thermal ponds for nuclear reactors and cooling towers, but it doesn't seem like it's that big of a heat exchange.
No, no, I don't think it's that intense. Yeah.
And Pat Lucio has her hand up online.
Yes, hi, Kavi. I wanted to touch base with you on a couple things. In the November 10th issue of Time magazine, they did a whole big thing on data centers. And there were two innovations that were described in there to help deal with the energy. And one was by Google. And I'm just going to read it to you so you can, because I don't know if I'll paraphrase it correctly, but that basically this person from Duke University's research found that the impact of limiting data center demand for a small amount of time, less than a day over the course of a year, would be large enough to add a significant share of planned new data centers without new power plants. And another person who is working on different ideas is looking at how data centers could become more flexible in their energy consumption during periods of peak. This particular article was And this is a private company called Emerald AI, and they did a pilot in Phoenix that their software helped an Oracle data center drop power consumption by 25% by doesn't say specifically, but being more flexible in their energy consumption. So I guess what my comment to you was, or my question to you was, is if you've heard of any of these projects that have been looking at, sort of, I guess, how you could have your cake and eat it too. If you limit for this period of time, then you're going to save enough power to do everything you want for the rest of the year. Now, I understand what you said about they want to keep their generative AI and stuff working, but at least in these two examples, it didn't seem to impact the functioning of the AI. So I wondered if you had any thoughts. This is a long question, I guess, but I wondered if you had any thoughts about these ideas that are starting to take root about flexible demand, reorganizing your power, et cetera, so that you could still do what you do, but just sort of restructure how you do it.
Yeah, great question. Flexibility is definitely something that we as advocates have been pushing for. Like you said, the idea is basically when there's times of peak demand, so when people are using a lot of electricity, when they come home or whatever, data centers would like not train their models or train all of their models at that
Oh,
time.
okay, right.
Yeah, and they argue that they simply cannot do that. They need to run all the time. There's no way, blah, blah, blah. That's what they say. I don't think that the conversation has not ended there. I think that there's room for that. I think that they will always say we can't do that. I think they can. Um, and like you said, like even a small reduction in that can lead to huge changes in a positive way for the grid. So yeah, flexible load is what it's called. They prefer to be inflexible. We're definitely pushing for them to be flexible, and that is I know that like other states are looking into that as well.
Okay.
But in Illinois, we're definitely pushing for them to be responsible energy users in choosing when they do that. Just like if you might someone one of y'all might be on time of use rates, which is when you can see how much the energy costs at a given time and maybe choose to like turn uh your dishwasher or your washer dryer on like an hour later after
Right,
peak
right,
demand is over.
right,
So,
right.
we can do it as individuals, and so I think that it only makes sense to encourage data centers to do it. I think that that might be more of a like a carrot versus stick approach to be like if you do participate and are flexible with your load, then you will get X. I think that that might be the way to go about it, but we haven't settled on what the most strategic pathway is. But it's a great question and definitely things that something that people around the country are thinking about.
Well, that's good to know because it sounds like to me that they could get their sort of have their cake and eat it too. Like you said, the demand, the timing of it is whether or not they think they can do it or not. Maybe the stick, if you want to operate in our state here, this is what
Yeah.
you're going to do. Um, do you have any idea about when some of the decreases in our electric bills will be starting to see some of those decreases, like when the capacity markets will be operational? I mean, I know Surge just passed it off, and I was just curious if you had
Yeah.
any projection as to when people might see those results.
Yeah, so I think people literally this month, downstate have been seeing some decreases in their bills compared to the summer. Specifically in relation to Surja, so the effective date of Surja is June 1st, 2026, and the fastest thing that is going to lead to decreases in people's bills is the virtual power plant program,
Right, right,
which allows people to it allows an aggregator to use folks' battery storage and deploy that to the grid at times of peak demand, as we've been talking about. And that's all like resources that already exist. We just need the like rules and the compensation structure in place to make that happen. But we should start seeing those savings by summer of next year. And that should only go up with time as more people get batteries and get access to the battery rebate. But that will be, I think, pretty uh that will be the quickest like immediate decrease as related to Surja. And yeah, that'll happen next summer.
Okay, good. I've just read some social media posts that people have been pushing back against this for a variety of reasons, and I was just wondering how long they would have to wait before they before they see some results. But yeah, okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Good job. Thank you. Good job, by the way. You did a very, very good job explaining things. I'm
thank you.
involved in this in a Sierra Club team, and those folks do a good job too. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're another person we could use as a resource. You did a great job
For
too. So
sure.
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, appreciate being invited. It's fun.
Okay, I'm done with my question. Thank you.
First of all, I want to thank you very much for this really informative meeting. And I appreciate your time and your knowledge and your effort, everything that you're doing. What I have to say may be a sidebar. Well, it is a sidebar to what you're saying. But there's a woman named Nita Farahaney. You know her name? She's a professor. Can you hear me? Are we okay? Okay. Nita Farahaney is a professor at Duke University, and she's written a book, and the book is called The Battle for Your Brain. Okay, now that was my entree to finding out who Nita Farahaney was. I read the book, and for me it was like, I knew nothing about this. Now I know a little bit, okay? So Nita Farahaney, The Battle for Your Brain. And as I followed a little bit more, followed the breadcrumbs, I find that Nita Farahaney has a class in law, AI law at Duke University. And she posts all of her classes online for free. So, but you kind of have to get in and start with the first class. I think she's on class 20 now, but you can still go back. And this is for everybody to say, if you, like me, feel like this is an inevitable place that I'm going to lose my humanity, you know, that there are many, many good things that can come out of this, but there's also risk to me as a human being, then Nita Farahaney addresses those questions in her law class. So her name is spelled Farahani, and she's Harvard graduate, a Duke graduate, blah blah blah. She's got the credentials, and it's free. And now I've gone through classes 1, 2, and 3, and I mean, you could fill libraries with the things I don't know, but it's a beginning. It's a start for understanding it. And again, I want to express my appreciation, and also to our club and to Sierra Club in general for being sane in a crazy world. So thank you.
Yeah. And I'll see y'all at the Pack Funder on Tuesday. I'll be there. So yeah.
I have a question too. It's kind of maybe dumb, I don't know. Okay, so do we at this point as consumers, consumers pay the same rates as data centers for our electricity?
Yes. But obviously they're using like many more kilowatts of energy, so their bills are much higher. But yes.
Yeah, but that's their problem. I mean, couldn't simply they pay more for this?
Yeah, that is an option. That is like, for example, in Minnesota, the bill that was passed, they have to pay an extra million or so dollars tax because they are causing more demand on the grid. So yes, that is an option. I believe that there's some regulations in place in Illinois to protect businesses from like being like unfairly treated and having to pay higher rates or whatever, but like that is like part of what we're trying to figure out. Like one thing we could do, yeah, like part of it is like figuring out how they can contribute on the supply side and the demand side. Supply side will be like the Beyonce thing I was saying, where they would bring their own new clean energy. Demand side would be something like an additional tax to make them pay more just because they're using a ton of energy.
Yeah, because basically, we're still, we're suffering for their sort of overuse. I mean, there's, it's just sort of, I don't know. Sometimes money talks, but then when you're dealing with huge companies and all this kind of stuff, that money isn't an influence. The second question is, okay, there's over 200 and something of these data centers in Illinois. How many of them are like in the 6 counties, around here? Do you have any idea?
I'm not sure, but let me
They just
drop
built one off of Barrington Road,
Oh,
just north of
I think I
90.
saw something there, but
Along 90 and 355, a lot of them last year.
wow.
putting a link in the chat and you can see exactly where they are in the
Oh,
state.
now it's really loud.
They're like, yeah. Yeah, if you click on that link, you can kind of see a little more detail as to where they are exactly. Um,
I see a lot of them in my travels. Yeah.
how would you get the chart?
I think it's on the data center map.com.
Where is it?
You could
Oh, down here.
You could Google almost anything.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Thank you.
yeah.
So, so I was wondering, I don't know if you know about this or not, but recently I saw my news feed about a town called Yorkville, and like near 47 and west of here, that the people pushed back on having a data center being built, and for aesthetic reasons, and they didn't want to ruin, the character of their town. Are you seeing, a lot of that pushback just by those reasons alone? The way it can disrupt the community.
Yeah, so there have been a couple of places in Illinois that have, because of community efforts, have issued moratoria for data
Yeah.
centers.
Okay.
So I know Sangamon County right now is fighting to get a moratorium on data centers right now. They're concerned about lack of transparency, lack of public meetings, a lot of unknown issues with the data centers. They want energy provisions put together too in Springfield. So they're working really hard on that. I believe that I think it's Batavia that also has a moratorium on data centers right now.
Okay.
So
Okay.
the moratoria help with I mean, a moratoria, is a moratoria. It doesn't mean it's never going to happen, but it means that there's a specific amount of time for community members to continue pushing back and be like, these are the things that we need if you are going to move forward with this contract.
Like
So there has been successes.
putting up demands on what they want
Yeah,
out of this. Okay. And
yeah.
you're probably going to see a lot more of that, I would think,
I hope
everywhere.
so.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So being
yeah.
third, and I think third in line, Illinois having the most of the data centers being built right now. You said that we're third
Yeah.
behind who was it? Texas and
No, Arizona, which I don't understand. You need no water.
yeah, I know Arizona too.
No water and
Which,
you need
well, they're
air
going to suck
conditioning,
out of
so
the aquifers in the Colorado River, apparently, which is not a good idea.
yeah.
It's already stressed out.
Yeah, I think it's crazy.
Supposed to go
California has a bunch, which makes sense.
yeah,
They are, Silicon Valley, so that's the hot thing there. Um, yeah, I know that a lot of legislators and like the governor are interested in getting a lot of data centers in Illinois. They want the state to be like a hub.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah. So
That's interesting.
you can have your opinions on that. I think the most important thing is if they want them to come here, they have to do it responsibly. And another thing I'll say is like we in Illinois, for example, if we put like a full out moratorium on data centers forever, they will simply build in like Indiana and do whatever they want, right?
They go
So
elsewhere. Yeah.
yeah, so I do see the argument on it, and I feel I feel a sort of obligation to have regulations in Illinois that don't stop them from building here, but make sure that they do it safely so that they don't go ruin some other community in another state that doesn't have um, the political power to put up regulations. Um, kind of like a harm reduction thing. So it's
Yeah. It's a good point. Yeah.
But what's the
Yeah.
benefit of
Thank you.
yeah. Um,
Go ahead. Richard.
yeah. What's the benefit of having data centers in Illinois? Does it physically attract other companies? Because I don't think it's going to employ that many people. I mean, it's going to use our power, but what's the rationale for the legislators and stuff to say we need these data centers?
Yeah, there are a few. Like I said, jobs is one thing. It brings construction jobs, but it also does bring like tech jobs to the state. Um, there is interest, I believe, particularly the governor is interested in like California has like Silicon Valley, Boston has a bunch of like they have a big like startup community and pharmaceuticals, whatever. Chicagoland doesn't really have like a specific innovative industry around it. And I believe that the governor's interested in like, okay, this can be our thing. Um, so that's another thing. The third thing is just economic development in general. So data centers do companies tell legislators, I'll put it that way, that they can bring a lot of economics to communities by like providing money for like parks and like providing more foot traffic for like small businesses and things like that. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that is the kind of story that they're selling to legislators, particularly in communities that need more economic development. And I think that is where some of that interest comes as well.
You talked about I don't know, and I don't know if I couldn't hear Pat's the whole conversation between you two very well, but at the beginning you talked about auctions for capacity, and then you talked about tariffs. Are those related? I mean, how are those related? Like you said, there's a tariff for what ComEd is imposing a tariff on ICC.
No. Okay. What that means, it's tariff in a different way than we typically think about it, I would say, as like in the public. A tariff is basically a rule. It's like a law, but it's on the regulatory side. So what happens is like I'm trying to think of like an easier example than well, I'll get this example. So like the large load tariff that ComEd is filing, essentially they're like, we have all these data centers who want to interconnect to the grid in our system on our specific power grid, where we see like writing on the wall that like legislation's going to come down the pipeline and require data centers to like do XYZ. We don't know what yet. ComEd itself is worried about data centers taking over the grid. So they have an interest in making sure that data centers are responsible energy users as well, because ComEd is maintaining it. So what they do is they file a tariff with the Illinois Commerce Commission. The Illinois Commerce Commission decides if that tariff is valid. There's like a whole process where like advocates and other sort of stakeholders will like lawyers and stuff will go through this docketed proceeding of the tariff and give their own opinions of how good this addresses the problem. And then the ICC, the Illinois Commerce Commission, is the one that ultimately decides what the stipulations in this tariff is, or this rule is, for large loads that want to interact with ComEd's part of the power grid. Does that make sense?
So as environmental advocates, this is a good thing, or potentially
Yes.
a good thing.
So
Yes.
it's regulatory,
Yes.
basically.
So I always think of a tariff as being money. Is this? I mean, is it money like a
No,
surcharge
not
or
like
anything?
this
No,
nonprofit
it's just a
bullshit.
rule for what they.
Yeah,
They're
it's
gonna
just
have
the
to do.
same, it's the same word, but it means different things, which is really not confusing at all, you know? Um, yeah, completely unrelated to the capacity auction, to be clear. But yeah, tariff just means a rule on the regulatory side. Oh yeah, we're glad that they did that. I have like coworkers at Vote Solar who work specifically on the regulatory side that have been involved with that proceeding, to make it better than make it as good as we can to put requirements on data centers. So with this whole data center thing and with a lot of things, it's really important for us to approach it from the legislative side and have stuff in statute and in law, and approach it through the regulatory side. Um, just like things work better in each realm depending on what you're trying to do. So we approach it on both sides.
It sounds to me like there's gonna be a lot of different legislation gonna come down the pipe over this, right?
Yeah.
For data centers and AI.
We hope. We hope.
Well, that's what we have to do. We have to promote that.
Yeah. That's what we're, like I said, we're gonna start up negotiations again on data center stuff, and hopefully start running a bill in the spring and see what happens. And definitely y'all will be in the loop since you're Sierra Club members, and I think we definitely want to have a good grassroots presence.
Hi, I'm back again.
Hi.
About to display my ignorance again. But if a data center is built in central Illinois, does it service central Illinois, or my concept is it serves the globe? Anybody can use that, the benefit of having a data center if they're connected. Is that correct? So
You mean,
it doesn't really help us to have data centers in Illinois, because we could use the benefits or companies or whatever. Doesn't make any difference if it's on our side of the border or it's on the other side of the Rocky Mountains. Is that correct?
yes, but I do think there is value in proximity. Like, think about if you live in a rural community and you don't have access to like fiber optic cables or something for internet access, and folks in rural areas, a lot of the time their internet access is a lot slower. If they had a data center near them that was connected to the network, then they would have higher internet rate, higher internet speeds, for example. So there is a sort of advantage to having data centers nearby, because they run the internet, frankly. But the more there are,
However,
yeah,
money talks. And if some corporation in upstate New York says, "Oh, we want that. We want to use that data center," then it wouldn't make any difference that it was close to us, because they could get as much benefit or more because they could buy it. They could buy the access. And these people, maybe in some rural area, if their taxes went up and they could buy access too. So I'm not just kind of not understanding why it's to the benefit of us to lose our Illinois farmland and our Illinois forests and our Illinois wildlife to these data centers. I just can't see how that's to our advantage. I just assumed some other state lost whatever they valued than to have us lose our coyotes.
Yeah, that's where politics get involved with rezoning and everything else.
Yeah, I think that this is where my knowledge gets murky on how the heck the internet works. But I think that data centers, like, I think it's less about like someone in another state can like buy access to it because it's like a company that's controlling it. So like if Google built a data center nearby, like the whole like the global thing of Google would be using it. It wouldn't be like a specific company in a different state doing it. It would be Google using it. Um, I think when legislators and proponents, whoever says economic benefits of data centers, it's less about like the data center itself and like what it's doing with the data and more so the business and like the innovation and the technology, whatever um it brings to an area, which again, like that is completely debatable. And there are
Aura.
disagreements about
It's like an aura, what's an aura word, or, sort of a concept.
definitely weird,
Yeah, yeah,
definitely abstract.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
Many cities want because they pay large real estate taxes, and obviously they don't put any demand on schools because they pay large amounts of real estate. It is benefit to locals in that.
Yeah.
Is there any way to? Oh, yeah. Go. You should come to the mic.
yeah, here.
Well, it's just one word. I think many cities like them because they pay large amounts of real estate taxes. And
Yeah,
obviously with the data center, they're not creating, there are no children that are paying for it in schools, but they're paying real estate taxes.
Ah, okay.
yeah.
Okay, that's one point. Okay.
That's why my taxes are so good in Elk Grove.
Is there any way to harness that energy that the coolant, heat energy?
That's interesting. I don't know, is my answer. You mean like the energy that they're
Drive
generating?
a turbine.
Yeah. I don't know. I have no idea. I've never thought about that and I've never seen anything about it. So,
I would say probably no, because I hate to say it, but somebody would have thought.
Yeah,
of it
someone way
before.
smarter than me. Go ahead and say it, Renee.
But it sounds like a great idea. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's a nefarious or malicious reason why they don't want to do it too. So.
Like you have a data center next to something
Right.
else, and then they merge.
Or have data centers in the ocean, or underground. Or, I don't know.
I do think that Norway was the place where they were building them because it's here's cool from there.
That makes sense.
But if you could use that heat to drive.
See, I should be in a think tank.
Yeah.
Come on.
Why not?
That's-
Use that heat,
Too bad
they
it can't
create
capture
heat.
the condensation.
I will say something about AI is completely unrelated. I when I go to Google something now, everyone's experiences AI chips in,
Oh,
and so I look up chord progressions to songs I like, and so I play them, and so AI has been contributing, and so this one song I like, I was like, oh, this is cool, and I started singing along with it, and then I went to the song, it wasn't anything like it. The AI had a hallucination. So I turned that into a song. Now, does AI get credit for that? I mean, I changed the rhythm. I got my own melody to it, but I used AI's chord progression that was clearly a hallucination. Yeah, I could do that. No, it's cool in the key it's in, so I don't know.
I am not a lawyer, so I don't know the answer to that.
Would I be correct in saying that AI is binary? And so once it gets the next letter or the next figure or whatever the next thing is, and it says, well, what's the most likely next thing? And it keeps building, it's binary, so it doesn't think thoughts. It thinks what's next? What's next? What's next? And that's how you end up with really weird responses because AI is rebooting it. What's the next letter? And all of a sudden you end up, you're far down the road before you realize you're not talking about what you were talking about.
I don't know. Tune in and find out.
You know, I think it's about time to stop the recording, so I'm just gonna say.
Okay, that's a good
thanks
idea.
so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you very much, Todd. That was fascinating, and really unique to what we've